The hum of the engines was a hypnotic drone, a promise of progress that lulled 180 souls into a state of suspended animation 37,000 feet over the cold, dark Atlantic. Inside the cabin of the Airbus A321neo, the air was stale and recycled, tasting faintly of plastic and yesterday's coffee. In seat 24A, a woman sat so still she might have been mistaken for part of the aircraft itself. Her name was Amelia Reed, but on this flight from Chicago to Dublin, she was nobody. She wore nondescript jeans and a faded navy blue hoodie that served as an invisibility cloak, her brown hair pulled back in a simple, severe bun. For nearly 3 hours she had been a ghost, a silent observer in a metal tube full of strangers. The businessman in 24B, a man whose expensive watch and restless energy screamed sales, had tried to engage her when they first boarded. "Long one, huh? Headed for business or pleasure?" he'd asked with a practiced smile. Amelia had offered him a tiny, almost imperceptible nod and turned her gaze to the thick blanket of clouds outside her window, a clear dismissal. He got the message. This wasn't a networking opportunity. The teenager in 24C was lost in a world of thumping bass only she could hear, occasionally glancing over, seeing only a boring, tired-looking woman who probably had a boring, tired life. But what no one could see was the truth behind her stillness. Her eyes, which seemed to be staring blankly at the ocean, weren't empty at all. They were scanning, assessing. The way the flight attendant braced herself against a minor patch of turbulence, the slight change in the pitch of the port-side engine, the subtle flex of the wingtips, these were all data points being logged and analyzed by a mind, trained for anything but quiet stillness. This woman, who seemed so unremarkable, was a walking, breathing secret, a secret that was about to become the only thing standing between 180 people and a watery grave. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Now back to our story. It all started with a sound, a simple, electronic chime from the front of the aircraft that most passengers ignored. But to Amelia, it was a gunshot in a library. It was followed by another, more urgent chime. Then the curtain to the galley was flung back, and a senior flight attendant hurried towards the cockpit, her smile plastered on, but her eyes wide with a fear she couldn't quite conceal. Amelia's body went rigid. Her training, a relentless beast she had tried to cage for this trip, was now wide awake and screaming. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. She watched the flight attendant disappear into the cockpit. Seconds later, the door opened again, and the woman stumbled out, her face ashen. She grabbed the intercom, her hand trembling. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice crackled, thin and strained, "is there a doctor on board? If there is a medical professional, please make your presence known to the wise cabin crew immediately." The cabin, previously a landscape of sleeping heads and glowing screens, rippled with a wave of nervous energy. A man in a tailored suit a few rows up stood and made his way forward. Hope, fragile and fleeting, settled over the passengers. Maybe it was just an allergic reaction. Maybe someone felt faint. Yes, there was a doctor. Things would be fine. But 5 minutes later, the doctor emerged from the cockpit, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He spoke in a low, urgent tone to the crew, and though Amelia couldn't hear the words, she could read the body language perfectly. It was a language she knew from 100 failed missions and battlefield triage scenarios. It was the language of no. No, he couldn't help. And what was worse, he looked terrified. The flight attendants huddled together, a frantic, whispering knot of barely controlled panic. One of them began to cry silently. Then a voice boomed from the first-class cabin, a voice accustomed to command, sharp and clear. "What's the situation?" A tall man with a military-grade haircut and the shoulders of a linebacker stood and strode toward them. He moved with an unnerving purpose that instantly silenced the rising murmur of passenger anxiety. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew that walk. She knew that posture. That was an operator. Navy SEAL, most likely. The lead flight attendant's whispered reply carried in the sudden, dead silence of the cabin. Amelia's trained ears caught the nightmare fragments. Both of them, food poisoning, captain's unconscious, first officer, barely autopilot, but the SEAL's face hardened into a granite mask. He turned, his eyes sweeping the cabin not like a passenger, but like a commander assessing a battlefield. He was calculating odds, formulating a plan, and realizing he had no assets. And so he did the unthinkable. He broke protocol and shattered the fragile calm. "Listen up," he roared, his voice filling every inch of the plane. "We have a critical emergency. Both pilots are incapacitated. The aircraft is on autopilot, but it cannot land itself. We need someone who can fly this plane. Now." Panic, raw and ugly, exploded through the cabin. A woman screamed. The teenager next to Amelia ripped her headphones off, her face a mask of confusion and terror. The SEAL's voice sliced through the chaos again. "Does anyone on this aircraft have any flight experience? Any kind of pilot's license? Anything at all?" The silence that followed was heavier and more terrifying than the screams. It was the silence of 180 people staring death in the face, each one praying that a hero would stand up, and each one knowing it wouldn't be them. The businessman next to Amelia was white-knuckling the armrests, his lips moving in a silent prayer. The SEAL's jaw was a knot of pure tension. He was out of options, a warrior without a weapon. Amelia could feel his desperation like a physical force. He was a leader, watching his people slide towards a disaster he was powerless to stop. Then he shouted something that changed everything, a phrase that bypassed Amelia's brain and hit her training like a lightning strike. He switched to the language of his tribe, the shorthand of special operations, where every syllable counts. "Who can fly this bird? I need a pilot now. Anyone with stick time, civilian or military. We need you. Fly this bird." The words were a key turning a lock deep inside her. That wasn't passenger language. That was the call sign of a mission gone wrong, the desperate plea of soldiers in the field. Her hands, which had been resting limply in her lap, clenched into fists. Every instinct, honed over 8 years of flying into hell and back, screamed at her to move, but a part of her fought back. "Stay quiet. You're off duty. You're nobody." This was her one chance to be normal, to not be the person responsible for everyone's life. The thought of stepping out of the shadows, of revealing the secret she guarded so fiercely, was nauseating. What if she couldn't do it? What if her Black Hawk skills didn't translate to this flying bus? A Black Hawk was a surgical tool. This was a sledgehammer. The SEAL was moving down the aisle now, his eyes pleading. "Come on, someone! The autopilot has us on a course, but it won't correct for weather, and it sure as hell can't land. We are running out of time." The teenager beside Amelia was openly sobbing now. "We're going to crash," she wailed. "Oh my God, we're all going to die." Amelia closed her eyes. One deep, centering breath. In, hold, out. She thought of the faces of the SEALs she'd carried into moonless nights, the trust they placed in her steady hands. She thought of the promise they all made to each other, never leave a man behind. She thought of the terrified girl sobbing next to her. Her skills didn't exist for parades or commendations. They existed for this. Her eyes snapped open, a fire lit within them. The quiet, withdrawn passenger was gone. For the first time in 3 hours, Amelia Reed spoke. Her voice was low, but it cut through the noise like a scalpel. "Master Chief." The SEAL was 2 rows ahead. He didn't hear her. She tried again, louder, the authority in her voice undeniable. "Master Chief, here." He spun around, his gaze locking onto hers. In that instant, he saw the change. He wasn't looking at a civilian anymore. Amelia unbuckled her belt and stood. The entire section of the plane stared, mouths agape, at the silent woman from 24A. She walked towards the SEAL, her movements economical and precise. This was the gait of someone who belonged in chaos. The SEAL saw it too. His eyes narrowed, reassessing her in a fraction of a second. "I can help," she said, her voice now a calm, steady instrument of command. "I'm a military aviator, 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment." The SEAL's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The 160th. The Night Stalkers. The legendary pilots who flew special forces into the world's most dangerous places. It was like finding a Formula One driver at a go-kart track. "Designation?" he tested, a crucial question. "Chief Warrant Officer 4, Amelia Reed," she replied without hesitation. 8 years flying MH-60 Blackhawks. I've flown support for DevGru, Rangers, and CIF teams in every sandbox you can name. I have thousands of hours in high-stress, low-visibility conditions. The details were correct, obscure, but correct. She was the real deal. A wave of relief so profound it was almost painful washed over the SEAL's face. "Can you fly an A321?" he asked, the question raw and direct. Her answer was brutally honest. "No, not certified on this airframe, but I know flight dynamics, I know systems, I can read a glass cockpit, and I know emergency procedures. With the first officer even semi-conscious to point things out, I can manage the aircraft and talk to ATC. It's our only shot." The SEAL, Master Chief Marcus Thorne, didn't need to think. "You're right. It's our only shot. I'm Thorne. What do you need?" Amelia's mind was already a whirlwind of checklists and contingency plans. "Get me in that cockpit. I need to assess the first officer and the aircraft's status. We need to keep this cabin quiet. Panicking passengers will only make this worse." Thorne nodded, turning to the cabin. "Everyone, listen to me. We have a qualified pilot. I need you all to remain in your seats and stay calm. Let her do her job." The words sent a shock wave of hope through the plane. Passengers looked at Amelia, this quiet woman they had completely ignored, with a mixture of disbelief and reverence. The businessman who had tried to make small talk stared at her, dumbfounded. You're a pilot?" he stammered. Amelia gave him a curt nod. Wasn't relevant until it was. She and Thorne moved to the cockpit. The lead flight attendant opened the door, her eyes pleading. The scene inside was grim. The captain was slumped forward, unconscious. The first officer was strapped in, his face a sickly green, a sheen of cold sweat on his forehead. He was conscious, but barely. The autopilot was engaged, but a yellow warning light blinked ominously on the main display. Amelia slipped past the sick first officer into the captain's seat. Her hands hovered over the controls, the side stick so different from the familiar cyclic of her Blackhawk. It felt alien. But the screens in front of her, the endless streams of data, they made sense. Altitude, airspeed, heading, fuel consumption. It was all a language she understood. Thorne helped move the unconscious captain out of the cockpit. "First officer," Amelia said, her voice sharp, "what's your status?" The man groaned. "Food hit us both like a freight train. Autopilot's on. Course to Dublin, but there's weather moving in. An icing warning." He trailed off, gagging. Okay, autopilot on was good. Weather ahead was bad. A sick co-pilot was a liability. "Thorne," Amelia said, "never." Taking her eyes off the screens. "Get in the right seat. Can you read instruments?" "Affirmative," he said, buckling in. "Basic naval aviation training. I can be your eyes." "Good," Amelia said, a flicker of relief cutting through the tension. "Call out any changes to airspeed, altitude, or any warning lights. I need to get a feel for this thing before we try to talk to anyone." She reached for the radio. "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Any station, this is Flight 8115, with a dual pilot incapacitation, requesting immediate assistance. Static. Only static. They were in the middle of the Atlantic dead zone. "We're on our own for now," she said, her voice grim. The next hour was the most intense period of study in Amelia's life. She methodically worked through the systems, her fingers flying across the touchscreens, pulling up checklists, fuel schematics, and hydraulic layouts. The barely conscious first officer would occasionally murmur a vital piece of information. Flap settings are on the central pedestal. De-icing switches are overhead. Before succumbing to another wave of nausea. Each fragment was a lifeline. Thorne, for his part, became the perfect co-pilot, his military discipline shining through. He relayed information from the cabin, kept the flight attendants focused, and provided calm updates to the passengers, his authoritative presence a balm on their terror. "Our pilot is in control," he announced over the PA system. "She is one of the finest aviators in the United States military. We are in good hands." The teenage girl, who had been sitting next to Amelia, asked a flight attendant, "Is she really going to land the plane?" The flight attendant, her faith restored by Amelia's sheer competence, replied with absolute conviction, "That woman is going to get every single one of us home." Back in the cockpit, Amelia was wrestling with the terrifying physics of landing. She knew how to land a Black Hawk on a pitching ship in a hurricane. But this was a 90-ton glider with swept wings. The approach speeds, the flare, the sheer inertia, it was all theoretical knowledge she'd never put into practice. It was like a brain surgeon being asked to perform open-heart surgery based on a textbook diagram. 2 hours after she took the seat, the radio crackled. "Flight 815, this is Shannon Control. We are receiving your emergency signal. State your intentions." Amelia grabbed the mic, relief washing over her in a dizzying wave. "Shannon Control, Flight 815. We have a dual-pilot incapacitation. The aircraft is under the control of a military helicopter pilot. I am not rated on this airframe, requesting a talk-down landing at the nearest suitable airport." There was a long pause on the other end. Amelia could picture the scene in the control tower, the sudden chaos, the supervisors rushing over, the disbelief. Then a new voice came on, calm and steady as a rock. "Flight 815, this is Senior Controller O'Malley. We read you. We are diverting all traffic and assembling a technical team. We are going to walk you down step by step. What is your current fuel state?" The next hour was a masterclass in communication. Amelia, O'Malley, and a team of Airbus specialists on speakerphone worked in perfect sync. They decided to divert to Shannon Airport. O'Malley and his team talked her through the A321's quirks, its descent profiles, its landing configurations. Amelia, in turn, absorbed the information with supernatural speed, her special ops training allowing her to process immense amounts of data under extreme pressure. As they began their descent towards the Irish coast, the first officer finally passed out completely. It was all on her now. "Shannon, be advised," she transmitted, her voice betraying no emotion. "I am now the sole operator of this aircraft." "Understood, 815, O'Malley replied, his voice a comforting presence. "Let's bring you home. Descend and maintain 10,000 feet. Reduce speed to 250 knots. Amelia disconnected the autopilot. For the first time she was flying the Airbus. The controls were heavier than she expected, but responsive. She eased the nose down, her eyes darting between the artificial horizon and the airspeed indicator, making 1,000 tiny corrections. "Altitude 9,000, speed 255, Thorne called out, his voice steady. As they dropped through the cloud layer, the turbulence hit. It wasn't severe, but in their situation, every bump felt like a catastrophe. The plane bucked and shuddered, but Amelia's hands on the side stick were rock solid. She'd flown through worse. She'd flown through rocket-propelled grenade attacks. This was just angry air. At 4,000 feet, they broke through the clouds. The green fields of Ireland spread out below them, a beautiful, welcome sight. And in the distance, the runway at Shannon Airport. It looked impossibly small. "Flight 815, you are cleared to land runway 24, O'Malley said. The wind is 270 at 15 knots. It's a bit of a crosswind, but you can handle it." Now came the hard part. "Gear down," Amelia commanded herself, flipping the switch. 3 green lights confirmed the landing gear was locked. "Flaps 1." The aircraft began to slow. "Flaps 2." The runway was growing larger, faster. She was still too high. "No, this is fine," she muttered. fighting her helicopter instincts. It's a glider, not a brick. Flaps 3, flaps full. The final approach. The next 90 seconds would feel like an eternity. "You're looking good, 815, O'Malley's voice soothed. "Your glide slope is perfect. Keep your speed at 140 knots. Her world shrank to the glowing numbers on her display and the strip of asphalt ahead. She could see the flashing lights of the emergency vehicles lining the runway, a stark reminder that there was no margin for error. 500, the plane's automated voice called out. 400. "Steady now," Thorne whispered, more to himself than to her. 300. A sudden gust of wind slammed into the side of the plane, trying to push them off course. Amelia corrected instantly, a firm input on the rudder pedals, her feet knowing what to do, even if her hands were unsure. 100. The runway threshold rushed underneath them. 50, 40, 30, 20. She began to ease back on the side stick, raising the nose in the flare she had only ever read about. 10. The main landing gear kissed the tarmac with a puff of white smoke and the satisfying screech of rubber on concrete. She held the nose off for another second before letting it settle gently. They were down. Flight 815, O'Malley's voice was thick with emotion. "Welcome to Ireland." That was a textbook landing. Amelia deployed the thrust reversers and applied the brakes, bringing the massive aircraft to a halt. She set the parking brake, ran through the engine shutdown sequence she'd memorized an hour ago, and then silence. The hypnotic drone was gone. In its place, the sound of her own ragged breathing. And then an explosion of sound from the cabin behind her, cheering, screaming, crying, a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated relief. Thorne just stared at her, his face a mask of profound awe. "Chief," he breathed, "I have never seen anything like that." Amelia finally let go of the controls, her hands shaking from the adrenaline dump. "Not my prettiest landing," she said with a weak smile. "But anyone you walk away from is a good one." When she emerged from the cockpit, the passengers saw their savior, the quiet woman from 24A. The businessman was speechless. The teenage girl rushed forward and threw her arms around Amelia's waist, sobbing, "Thank you, thank you." Amelia, awkward with the praise, just patted the girl's back. "It's what I do," she said softly. The story of the hero Night Stalker pilot became an international sensation. The airline offered her a fortune, free flights for life. She turned it all down. She didn't want a reward for doing her duty. Before she was finally allowed to board another flight to continue her journey, Thorne found her. "The teams are going to want to meet you," he said, a grin on his face. "The pilot who landed an Airbus on her first try." Amelia just shrugged. "Tell them I got lucky." "That wasn't luck, Chief," he said, his expression turning serious. "That was skill. But you know what was most impressive? You sat there for 3 hours, not needing anyone to know who you were or what you could do. You were invisible. But when the call came, you stepped up. That's the mark of a true warrior." As she walked to her new gate, blending back into the river of travelers, she knew he was right. Her greatest strength wasn't her ability to fly, but her willingness to be silent until her voice was the only one that mattered. She settled into her seat on the new flight, another anonymous face in the crowd, the quiet woman in the window seat. But now, she carried the silent, unshakable knowledge that when the world fell apart, she was more than ready to put it back together. Make sure to subscribe to Skybound Stories and check out our other amazing stories by clicking the videos on your screen right now.